Hi guys, Brock here. I just wanted to introduce some lingo, or rather some terms that we're going to be using over the course of the next couple of units. The first two units are a little bit stats intensive, if you couldn't tell that by the titles, and they involve a lot of graphs. Not necessarily as mathy as we may have expected right off the cuff. So let's jump right in. Let's start with a question. What do you see here in front of you? What do you notice? Hopefully most people notice that something is trending upwards, something is changing upwards with respect to something else going upwards, and you'd be right in noticing so, but what other information might you need in order to tell me what is increasing with respect to something else? Hopefully most of you responded with uh, axes labels, right? Like you need labels. All good graphs need labels, and I hope that you pick that off as you work through these next couple of units. So if you look over here on the left, you'll see that I've added in the y-axis label. The y-axis commonly runs vertically up and down, and the x-axis runs horizontally left to right. Now I've labeled the vertical axis, so I will go ahead and label the horizontal axis as well. And you'll see that's square footage. So we notice that as square footage increases in the rightward direction, so too does price in the upward direction. So we have here what we would call a positive correlation, positive trend here, yes. But you might be able to guess that with price and square footage in the equation, you might be able to guess what this graph is referencing, but do you know for certain? Again, hopefully most of you realize that this chart doesn't have a title. So we didn't know what was increasing necessarily right off the cuff. And I'll add that in now. And that is average price of a house per square foot here in Kingston. So per square foot that we increase a certain amount in price. And that raises another question. This graph still isn't labeled properly. What else is it missing? Hopefully most of you realize that it's not labeled with numbers. We don't have any numbers here. A good graph will always have numbers along its axes. So I'll go ahead and add those in. Wonderful. There we see, okay, as we start around 1,250 square feet and work our way up to 2,250 square feet, and then a little leeway on both sides, to the right and to the left over here. But we notice, like we expected, as the square footage increases, so too does the price. But how much? How much is the price? Again, you need to label your graphs properly, otherwise it's meaningless. We need to make sure everything is labeled properly. So hopefully you're paying attention to that as you work through the rest of these units. And there, I've added in the final portion here, the left side here, and this is obviously in dollars. So a house that is approximately 1,250 square feet will cost you just probably a shade under $200,000, which is reasonable, but 1,250 square feet isn't all that big. If you wanted to, you could add in some. I could add in some grid lines. It's not necessary. It's not necessary, but we could make it a little bit more specific, and I'll add in some of these. So yeah, you could add a little more specificity to it, make it a little more accurate, but the main ideas are the labels. So you want a title, you want a y-axis label along with a scale. This is called a scale, and along with an x-axis scale. This right here has been shortened along the right side. Typically that's not welcomed, but what you'll notice is we do have that positive correlation. As something increases upwards, it's called positive. As if this was reversed, and let's say this point was up here and the trend was downwards, that would be a negative correlation. If the points were all over the place, so if I had something here, something here, something here, something here, something here, then that would be no correlation at all. And another thing about the correlation is this is what we would call a linear correlation. And we call it linear because if we draw a line straight through these. And in this case, we would call it a line of best fit. I'll draw that in now. That touches most of the data points along the way. We can see that this is quite linear. These follow a very linear trend. So if we were to follow this outwards into the 300 or the 4,000 square feet homes, we could get a good approximation of how much that would cost. And again, this is a positive linear correlation. If the data points were all over the place or if they seem to follow a curved path, we would say that is a non-linear correlation or no correlation at all. So I guess that about wraps this up. The main ideas here are making sure that all graphs are labeled accordingly with appropriate scales to make sure that nothing is misleading. You'll touch more on this in Unit 2 when you deal with two variable statistical analysis. Early on here in the first unit, we're only going to be concerned with one, but a lot of the terms you learn in the first unit will be applicable in the second unit. So carry forth, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.